Good morning. Um, I feel impressed to share something that the Lord gave to me back in, what was it, February the 7th this year. I ask you think about it prayerfully after you hear this. This will be like part one. We call this Sleepwalkers. Try to avoid being censored. I was censored already one time for something I posted on Facebook, so I want to make sure you hear this dream in its pure form. And then in another podcast, I'll share with you and expound upon what I think is going on here. But back in February the 7th, I was on my 7th day of a fast. Just came off that. I hadn't actually come off it. I was still going on it. And I woke up about 3:33 in the morning, and a.m. yes, in the morning, and prayed for a while. Got up, prayed for a while, and then went back to sleep. And as I went back to sleep this time, the Lord gave me a dream, and it's kind of lengthy and detailed, and I'm going to just share the dream with you because I want to keep this limited to about a 10 or 15 minute cast, and I'll expound upon it later. But here it is. I was back at my old job. I worked in an oil refinery for Crisco Oils. Worked for Smuckers at that time. They had purchased it from Procter and Gamble. And in my dream, I'm retired actually, so I was 2 years out retirement, and here I'm dreaming I'm back at work again. And in my dream, I realized I was retired. It's like they had called me back for some special help or something. And it was my first day on day shift, and coming there in the morning and getting my orders. And I was to run one of the sides of the refinery. There's something to that too. And in the refinery, we after we got out of our meeting, I knew my job. This is actually where the dream started. I knew what I was supposed to do. And but there was people meandering around I didn't know. There's just talking groups like manager. I thought, who are these people? They don't belong here. And as I went into the control room, my first job is to see if tanks aren't overflowing or what's running and what's going on. And as I went to the control room, where we usually have a whole row of monitors and equipment that you press the buttons and make things work, check on things, none of that was there. The monitors were all gone. I couldn't look and see what was going on. And I was perplexed. I said, well, I've been away for a while. Maybe they got a new system, something I don't know. I'll talk to one of the other operators. I looked around, I didn't see anybody I knew. In fact, the place had a couple of people huddling around talking to each other, but they didn't seem to know anything. They didn't belong there either. I just didn't understand what all was going on. And so I went over through a door to where we have an office area, some of the desks, and there weren't too many people seated at a desk. And one person I did see seated at a desk, well, they didn't have monitors either. She was just typing away. She did have like a little iPad, but it had nothing to do with whatever she was doing. So the whole thing was just bizarre, and yet real. So I came back into the control room, and I'm looking around again, trying to spot something that I could figure out what's going on. And I turned around, and here was a fellow operator. Her name was Barbara. And Barbara had already retired too. She retired a couple years before I was, and here she was in uniform, and I guess she was operating the other side of the refinery. So I looked at her, I said, Barb, I'm so glad to see you. What's going on? I don't see any monitors. Tell me, how come there's no monitors? And she just looked at me and said, I know. And I said, well, what is it? Why is there no, how can you tell what's going on? She just looked at me kind of blankly and said, I know. And then she kind of held out her hands like she wanted me to give her a hug. And I said, well, sure. I put my arms out, and we hugged each other. And but she didn't really seem to be able to hold a conversation. That's all she could say was, I know. And she just looked at me with those eyes like she was lost. And there was a woman standing behind her, or to the side of her, and she was hovering around her. She was like the little fish that hang around a shark. She was upset that I was touching this woman. I was touching Barbara, her Barbara. And she was very protective of her, and she didn't say anything, but you could tell she was fidgety. She was upset that I was talking to this girl. And so I kind of backed off after I gave her a hug and realized that I wasn't going to be able to get any information out of her, and I didn't really want to mess with this strange woman hanging around behind her. So I started to realize that, man, I can't work this way. What am I doing here? I'm just going to go home. As I walked out the door of the control room and I'm going outside, and I realized, I thought, well, I'm passing by the refinery building because all the equipment and everything that's going on is actually in a separate building. I'll go in there, and we got a monitor and a controls up there in a control room on the 4th floor. And maybe I'll meet somebody else up there I can talk to and figure out what's going on. So I won't give up yet. So I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. And there's a bunch of people. On the 4th floor is huge. It's a big, the building is huge. I wouldn't say it's the size of a football field, but maybe about half the size. It's long, it's big. And the elevator is in one far corner of it, and the little control room is in the far eastern corner of it. And so it was a little bit of a walk from the elevator all the way to the small control room. But as I get out of the elevator and I'm starting to go down the path to that little control room, there's maybe about a dozen or so people coming at me. Maybe there might have been more. Lingering, they must have heard the elevator and they're coming to see what was going on. They're coming towards me. And as I looked, I'm very determined to get to the control room, so I wasn't wanting to pay a whole lot of attention to them. But they're looking at me like, who are you? What are you doing here? You don't belong here. They gave me some really hard-looking glares. And I thought, well, I know who I am. I know my authority. I know I belong here, and I know what I'm doing. So I don't care who these guys are. They're not messing with me. I'm just going to keep on going. And so I did. I walked right past them. I mean, I didn't bother to even stare them down in the face. They just looked angry and mean and wondering what I was doing. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? So I go to the control room all the way across the floor. And there's, I don't know, maybe more than a dozen people in this small control room that's only designed to take about 2 or 3 people. So there's no way I could even get inside it to look at the monitor if they have one and see all the control and find out what's going on. So I just felt like I was defeated having come all that way up there. And so I turned around and looked on the side of the control room, which was all enclosed in glass and the doors. There was somebody I recognized who wasn't one of these strangers just dopping around. And it was Bruce. I looked at him and said, he's just standing off in the corner by himself. I said, Bruce, what are you doing? Is that you, Bruce? And he didn't answer me. So I thought, well, maybe that's not him. The guy had a beard. Bruce never had a beard before. And he put on some weight. Well, it's been a couple of years. So I walked up to him and I looked at him hard in the face. And I could see, it is. I said, Bruce, it is you. What's going on? And he wouldn't look at me. He didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. He was gone. He was sleepwalking. He wasn't even there. He just in body only, just standing still. And then I could see the corner of his mouth was a little foam, a little drool, just slowly just kept drooling down the side of his mouth. And I got kind of scared after I saw that. I said, "Oh my goodness." I walked away. Bruce, I just walked, turned around. I said, I got to get out of here. So on the far eastern side by that little control room, there's a stairwell. And I started to head for it. I said, I'm just getting out of here. And as I did, I saw somebody else. I mean, there were other people still hanging around. Somebody else I recognized. I said, Rick. I said, Rick, how you doing? And he looked at me. He recognized me. But he never said a word. Never said a word. But there was a big guy kind of standing next to him. And he didn't like that I was talking to Rick. And I was trying to get some information, and the guy looked at me, and he was mean and ugly, and he pointed his finger at me. He says, "You don't belong here. Get out." With that, I got mad. He had that finger in my face. I said, "You know what, son? You don't point your finger in my face. I'm talking to a friend." And I took his hand and his finger, and I twisted it and grabbed it and pulled it down. And I tell you what, it would have taken a full-grown man down to his knees the way I put a hurting on his hand. However, it didn't bother him. It didn't bother him at all. It's like he never felt it. And I said, well, that's enough. I'm not going to find out what's going on. I'm leaving. I'm getting out of this plant. So I walked down the stairs instead of taking the elevator and got my car across the street. And as I'm leaving the parking lot, there's somebody else starts their car and they're following me. And they didn't get too far. They pulled over or something. I lost them. They never bothered me. And that was the end of the dream. So like I said, I want to keep it short and sweet. Short and sleep. Yeah, I'm thinking these guys are sleepwalkers. I want to call it that because if I call it something else, it may be taken off YouTube. But I'll expound upon it later. I'll let you pray about it and think what you think about it. But I tell you what, I got this before you started seeing all these other people telling about some of the symptoms they were getting for having taken these inoculations. So think about it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take it. And I'm afraid that this showing me that this happens in the workplace, it's probably the biggest way that they're going to get most people to take this stuff, because you're going to be threatened with losing your job otherwise, especially if you're in the food industry, the health industry. Hospitals and nurses are being really enforcing that. A lot of them are refusing, but when it comes down time that you've only got a few weeks and you've got to take it, most of them are taking it. Now, it's not the mark of the beast, but it's a slippery slope to it. If you say yes to this, you'll probably say yes to the mark of the beast. And I'll expound upon that later. God love you. I love you. And I'm just hoping that we can save some people some heartache, some pain, some trouble, and from going to hell and burning through eternity. God loves you, and He's not willing that any should be lost, and neither am I.